Welcome to The Shift Show with Adriana Bucci. Join me every week to learn all about narcissistic abuse recovery, healing from physical and emotional pain after the abuse, and everything else to do with toxic people and how they affect your physical, emotional, and mental health. And no, you are not the crazy one. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Let's get right to it.
Hey Tina, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. We'll start off with letting the audience know a bit of who you are and your story. So I will pass the mic off to you and we'll get the show on the road.
Perfect. Well, no one chooses this path of working
True.
in the realm of narcissistic abuse. Um, as we talked about earlier, I think it's chosen for us. And there are some people who go through something really hard, and especially like this, and they don't ever want to look back. I refer to myself often as the accidental author and family court advocate. Because this was not the path I chose. But I do believe things happen the way they're supposed to. So back in 2008, I was in a really toxic, abusive marriage, and I ended up on a therapist's couch wanting to know what my part of it was and how I could fix myself, because I had heard for so many years that it was me and I was the
Right.
problem. And so I that's really how I ended up in therapy. And I remember sitting there and just for the first time emotionally vomiting my entire life onto this poor therapist. And at the end of the hour, she got up and she walked across the room and brought back the DSM-5 and had me read the excerpt on narcissistic personality
Ooh.
disorder. And she said, I can't diagnose this person. I'm not qualified to do that. I've never met him, but everything you're telling me, this is what it sounds like. And the rose-colored glasses optimist in me, I was so excited because if we had a label, I could fix it. And that
So true.
was really, I was like, great, now what do we do? This is so exciting. Like, I was so happy to just
Aw.
make sense of my marriage and what had gone on. And when I read it, I thought, no, this is him 100%. And she looked at me, and now I get it. And she looked so compassionate, and she said, there's really nothing anyone can do. There's no medication, there's no therapy. You either accept that this is your life or you leave.
Yeah.
And I was angry, and I just thought, how dare she tell me I can't fix my marriage? And so I went home that day and I was excited telling him, you're a
Oh
narcissist.
boy. I can imagine how
And,
that went.
well, back then, there was nothing out there on the topic. And so I remember he and I sat down and we looked it up together, like what this means. And he read it and he goes, well, that sounds like my dad, but I don't think that's me. And in my mind, I'm thinking we just took a huge step forward because he and his dad are the same person.
Oh
So
boy.
we're one step closer to him accepting that this is who he is. And oh my gosh, I just want to go back in time and hug myself back then because
I don't
just
blame you.
poor little thing. Like,
Yeah.
and then it was about another 8 months. He agreed to go to therapy with me, but this is funny, true to narcissistic fashion, it had to be a male PhD.
God.
Yeah.
God.
And so we found someone, and it was about 6 months into that process where the psychologist said, I really think a psych eval is in order. Like, there are just some, I can hear you saying you're sorry about things, but I don't feel that you're really sorry. I feel like these are empty words. And that was the day my ex-husband said, we're done.
Wow.
Yeah, he's the one that actually called the marriage. And of course, he blamed me for manipulating the
Oh yeah.
psychologist because
Oh my God.
I'm much more powerful than I give myself credit for. Apparently, I can.
I'm surprised he didn't manipulate the psychologist, because that's usually what you
This
hear
guy
happens.
this guy had a background of working in prisons with
Okay,
absolute
perfect.
narcissists and sociopaths, so he was so versed in it,
Yeah, he saw right through him.
and he saw right through him. And so that day when he said, "I think we need to do a psychological evaluation," that was it. That was the end game. And my ex-husband called me on we had taken separate cars to that meeting,
Oh boy.
and he called me afterwards and he said, "I just called the doctor and I let him know we're done. You've manipulated him, um, and our marriage is over. I'm not doing this." And I'm like, "Okay." And it felt like the biggest weight off my shoulders
Amazing.
that someone had called it, because I had been, I, what it's like when you're in that fog for so long. And I remember around that time, my brother had come to visit. My brother said, "I don't even recognize you anymore. Your spark
Mhm.
is gone. You aren't you. And what is going on?" And I thought I was putting up this great front and facade on the perfect little family. And apparently I wasn't. You're
No.
just so beaten down. So when he said we're done, I was actually grateful. And that was where my marriage came to an end. But then I, found myself, I had two very little girls. They were 2 and 4 years old at the time. And thinking back then, I was still, I guess, because he had never really participated in their lives.
Mhm.
And I thought this is going to force him to step up to the plate and be a dad. If
Right.
he has to have them one on one during his parenting time, it was before I understood how damaging a narcissist can be to a child. And I guess before I understood that the children just become weapons and pawns to
Yep.
them in child custody situations.
Mhm.
And so still the naive part of me was like, this is great. He's going to have to wake up and make them breakfast and, go take them to the park, and they need that. They need a dad. And so
Mhm.
yeah, just the naivety that
Yeah,
most of us have
for
before we
sure.
really grasp what we're up against.
Yeah, 100%. So what ended up happening with, like, all the custody stuff with him? Did he
Oh,
try to use them as pawns? Oh boy.
yeah, no, it's we started our battle in 2009, and I really thought if left to his own, he's not going to ask for any custody of them because he has no bond with them. During our marriage, I considered my co-parent to be our nanny. I would have
Mm.
never even thought to ask him for help with with the girls at any point in our marriage. And so when he started fighting for custody, I was in shock and couldn't understand, what this was about. So he was asking for 50-50 custody. And first of all, I'm
What?
thinking, yeah, first of all, I'm thinking he had just moved 4 hours away. You can't share custody of a 2 and 4 year old from 4 hours away. So
Yeah.
like, that doesn't even make sense. But, what I quickly learned is for the narcissist, it's all about winning and it's
Mhm.
about control and it's about hurting you. And, when he knew the girls were my number one button and the number one way to hurt me.
Yeah.
And so it became World War III. And, right out of the gate. The second year of our custody battle, we were in court 13 times just that year alone.
Wow.
So I became, I'd walk into the courthouse and the bailiff would say, "Hi, Miss Swithin." So when the bailiff starts recognizing you
Yeah,
when you're going through security check, that says a lot.
it's a problem,
And
yeah.
and because of, my ex-husband had controlled the finances during our
Oh.
marriage. And so I was left with nothing. I found myself in a local domestic violence shelter with my daughters, $200 to my name. I couldn't afford an attorney, but he could. So I walked into family court on a very uneven playing field,
Yeah.
and had to represent myself. It
Oh.
turned out to be a 10-year battle.
Oh,
And yeah, but I will tell you, I was one of the success stories. I
amazing.
successfully, it took from 2009 to 2000, I'd say about 13, before I protected my kids physically. He was not allowed to have visits with them at all. And then in 2019, I successfully terminated his parental rights.
Amazing.
So he has no custody of at all, no
Nice.
legal rights. So yeah, but it's what a journey.
Shit show, yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you've seen, I created a wheel. It's called the post separation abuse wheel.
Mhm.
And it was literally the playbook of what my ex husband did. And now, being where I am today, and I'm happily remarried, and my daughters are teenagers and they're doing fantastic. So many of the moms that I talk to, and some dads also, they see this wheel and they're like, oh my God, that's literally the narcissist playbook during a child custody battle. um, it has nothing to do with the kids or their desire to really be a part of their lives.
Mhm.
They literally become weapons.
It's true.
Yeah.
Wow. So did he ever like visit the kids at all or take them
Oh
in
yeah.
at any time?
Oh yeah. He exercised his parenting time. It started out, he had almost a pretty equal parenting time share,
Wow.
because the courts are very broken. And I was so back then, I didn't realize the reality of the court system. And even a parent who has never participated in a child's life, if they step up to the plate and say, hey, put me in, I want to give this a try, the courts are going to give them the opportunity. And I think that has to do with, the courts become so overburdened by deadbeat parents
Mhm.
that anyone who steps up, as long as they have a pulse,
Mhm.
um, and they aren't actively doing drugs in the courtroom in front of the judge, the judge is
The
going
bar
to,
is very low.
right, the bar is, and that's one of the things I say, my threshold of what's acceptable as a healthy parent is completely different from what the court's threshold of
Yeah.
what's acceptable.
Yeah.
And and I see it through a different lens now, as a family court advocate, because they see the worst of the worst. They see the extreme abuse cases, kids with broken bones, and um, so that's the scale in which everyone is judged. And if you don't fit on that scale, and what we know about narcissistic abuse is that it's so much of it is psychological and emotional. And then it becomes he said, she said, and or she said, or he said. It's impossible, for the judge to know most of the time. They don't know either parent. And for all
Right.
they knew, I was a pathological liar who was just making, and that's kind of the lens that I now look through it is I wouldn't want their job either.
Mhm. Fair enough.
um, they're forced to make some pretty hard judgment calls. And with a narcissist, they're such good liars. And so many abuse victims, because of anxiety or PTSD, we can end up presenting as the one that looks a little
Mhm.
unstable because we're driven by emotion and we're trying to protect our kids. And so they're just looking at this like shell shocked person who is trembling in the courtroom. And
Mhm.
they, it's and what I find is that most family court professionals, and this is a worldwide issue, it's not just here in the US or up there in Canada, they're not trauma informed. They're not
Mhm.
DV informed. And so, victims of domestic violence end up looking problematic to the court, and the narcissist can put on quite a show. The family court system becomes their stage.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, it's like it's such a lose-lose situation when you're the one who's not the narcissist and you're trying to do what's right for your kids and you know what the facts are, but they're so good at manipulating the system, and the system's so broken already that it's such an exhausting battle.
Absolutely. And I feel like for me, the turning point was really looking at it through the lens of the family court system, that
Mm,
to them, these are just business transactions. There's
right.
no emotion in it. And emotion, most judges, most attorneys are highly narcissistic themselves,
Mhm.
and maybe not full blown diagnosable, but they're at least pretty high on the
Mhm.
scale, and so emotions make them uncomfortable. And so when I started looking at it through the lens of strategy and watching other attorneys, I would go plop myself down in the courtroom on days where the cases were not mine, and
Oh,
just
wow.
observing other cases and beginning to learn the reality of the system, and kind of get more into a strategy mindset. And I feel like that was really the shift in my case, where I started to be able to protect my kids.
Amazing. That's amazing. Wow. That's such a great idea to just like observe, because when you're
Right.
in it.
When you're in it, and I know, the past, over the past year, so many things have gone online, and so
Mhm.
now you can watch a lot of court proceedings online. I'll be
Oh,
working here at my desk, and having a Zoom hearing going on in the
cool.
background. So it's even more accessible for a lot of people to observe, and I highly recommend it. If you can get in front of your own judge and just watch, what matters to them, procedures that other attorneys follow, strategies that other attorneys use, and what the judge seems to cling on to. Those things can really go a long ways towards, you being able to protect your kids.
That's a really great idea. Wow.
Yes. It
That's
was very
amazing.
helpful for me.
Yeah. That's so smart. Seriously.
And somewhere in there, I think it was about 2012, um, I started writing my first book. So
Amazing.
and it was a way for me to process and purge what I was going through, because back then I truly believed I was the only person in the world. You couldn't find any articles online about it. And
Mhm.
so I started this book. I had never written a book before. I'm not a writer. And, everything just kind of unfolded. And I had an online blog back then, One Mom's Battle. And it was just a way for me to document this insanity that I was living. And that made no sense to me. And so it was a way for me to kind of look at it and go, okay, no, this really happened. I just
Amazing.
wrote this blog, and I can read it, and it because you're in such a fog in that battle portion also. Because I never even had time to go through the healing of narcissistic abuse before I found myself in this family court nightmare. And so writing, whether it's a journal, I always recommend to people, write your story, because when
Mhm.
you're able to pick it up and actually read it back, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I've been through a lot. I give myself a lot of credit. It's survival mode, but that outlet of being able to write books or blogs or whatever was really my healing journey.
Yeah, writing is so cathartic, and I'm so glad that you made it into a blog, because that helps so many people too with their journeys who are going through similar things. Because divorcing a narcissist, not something I've ever done, but definitely, I was the child of a narcissistic divorce, so I can totally empathize
Oh,
with it. Yeah, I was the pawn. It was good
you were
times.
the pawn.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yep. So definitely
wow.
it's so great to be able to like write all of that stuff out. And once you get those thoughts out and like onto paper or in a book or on a blog or whatever, it gives them less, like it gives those thoughts less power over you.
Absolutely. And when you start hearing from other people, oh my God, I could have written this. This is
Hmm.
exactly what I went through. You start to realize that the narcissist isn't as smart as you gave them
Oh
credit
yeah.
for.
They're
That it's
so
just
predictable.
this, right. This I always say there's some type of hidden manual that they all use.
I
It's
know.
like
They
their
say all the same
playbook.
stuff.
They just pass it around, and I'm sure it's some underground network somewhere that they're like,
Or
"Hey, dude, try this."
honestly, honestly, they have some kind they have the exact same playbook. Like, it doesn't matter what country you're from, what culture you're from, where you're at in the world, your age, nothing like that. They're all the same.
They're all the same. And once you start putting those pieces together, you're kind of looking, I people ask me a lot, have you forgiven him? And I say, that's a mixed bag. And I feel like it's a different journey for everyone. For me, it's been forgiving myself for the red flags that I overlooked as a young 20 something year old girl who was, really truly seeing the world through rose colored glasses and seeing the best in people to a fault.
Mhm.
And, for me, it's been more of a journey of compassion to where now I can look at him and think, I see the 5-year-old little boy in there because I believe that's where he's emotionally stunted. I feel like that's where his trauma is probably around the age of 5. And so I can look back at him as a 5-year-old and say, I feel compassion for him because no one would choose this life,
Mhm.
void of emotion and love and true connection and authenticity with other people. No one would choose that. And so, I can look back and see him with compassion when I view him as a 5-year-old.
Mhm.
But it's quite a journey
Yeah.
to go through something like
Yeah.
this. And when I remember when I started my blog and I titled it One Mom's Battle, it was because I really did believe I was the only person in the world going through this. And so to connect with, and that's where I love how this whole world of narcissistic abuse has evolved, because we are so connected, and connecting with other people and hearing stories and sharing stories and realizing I'm not crazy. This was not me. This is something so much bigger. And I always say I am filled with gratitude because the people that I meet through this journey, it's like the narcissist pre-screens the best friends you could ever have, because we all share similar qualities and traits. And they target people who are exact opposites of themselves. And so once you get into these communities, you find some pretty good friends.
So true. It is so true. Some of the best friends I've made in the past couple of years have been through this community, and it's just amazing how supportive everyone is and understanding. And, it sucks what happened to all of us, but at the end of the day, like, to have this new sense of community and all of these people who get it and to help each other through it is freaking amazing.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about what you do with like your clients and helping other, parents going through these types of battles
Sure.
and how you
So
got into it and all
how
that.
I got into it. So when I used to go and just sit in the courtroom and just watch other cases, I'm surprised no one ever took out a restraining order against me, because I would watch other cases and I would instantly feel connected with these moms. And I would be like, oh my God, this is exactly my story. This is what she's going through. And so on a break during court, I would follow them out into the hallway and I'd be like, hi, my name is Tina. We have a lot in common. Can we go do coffee or lunch? I'll buy you
It's
lunch,
amazing.
And so I'd give my cards out to people. And I started forming like a little group of women in my area, and we'd support each other for court and bounce ideas off each other and co-parenting strategies. And over time, it just, through my blog and my book, I started having people reach out to me for advice on custody related issues, co-parenting, communication, how to empower our kids and really be there for them. Because I'm a firm believer that if a child has at least one rock in their life, a healthy parent, they can come through this and
Mhm.
be thriving. So I started, just answering people's emails and connecting with people. And at one point, I think it was about 2014, someone said, you really should turn this into a business. There's a huge need for it. So I started coaching people back then. I don't even know if there was a such thing as a divorce coach back then. I didn't know what to call myself.
Right.
And so I started kind of this website. I left my career and merged into this and just jumped in like, okay, this
Amazing.
is what I'm doing. And now I'm to the point where, there's very few people doing the work of the family court system
Mhm.
and the co-parenting issues that come up. And so I got to the point where I could work 7 days a week, 15-hour days, and still not keep up with the demand.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, I started the High Conflict Divorce Coach Certification Program. And I brought in experts from all over the world to speak on different aspects of, the family court system, legal, psychological, all different areas of expertise. And now I train coaches to do what I do specific to the family court system.
Amazing.
So it's been a huge success, and
Yeah.
it's been good for me because before I had nowhere to refer people if my calendar was full. And now I can say there's this amazing group of people who are out there doing this work, and I feel confident passing them along because I know the training that they've received.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Like, that is so amazing. And there's such a need for high conflict divorce coaches, because the attorneys are not going to help with any of that kind of stuff. They just care about, like, the facts and all that kind of stuff. And, like, they're not going to obviously coach you through anything.
Right.
Exactly. And then, if you're lucky enough to have a trauma informed therapist who gets it, who can guide you, great. But coaching is it's a next level when it comes to handling this kind of stuff and healing from it, even because, people sometimes underestimate the power of coaching. Like, therapy's great and all that. But when you have someone who's actually been through what you have been through and they're guiding you through exactly what they went through, which is exactly what you're going through, there's just that level of you feel so much less alone and you get
Right.
that validation. And that just makes things so much easier. Not that it's going to be easy whatsoever. It's a shit show process no matter what, whether you're
Right.
divorcing a narcissist or, going low or no contact with a narcissistic parent or whatever the case may be. It's a disaster regardless. But having that support there, because it's hard to find that from your friends too, especially if they've never been through it. Like, all you can do is kind of vent, but what are they going to tell you, right?
Right. And that's kind of, what I found is, all of my friends who had normal families and
Hmm.
had never experienced, they're looking at me going sideways, kind of going, well, what's your part of it? Where are you in the conflict? And I'm
Hmm.
thinking, it only takes one person to create
Yeah.
a high conflict situation. And that's, so I completely agree. And to find, when I had my therapist point out that I was married to a narcissist, now looking back, I know how rare that is
Yeah.
because most of them really just learn the basics, textbook
Hmm.
definition, and there's very little research out there and training on what narcissistic abuse is. And so until that, catches up with the reality of our world, the narcissistic abuse coaching industry, there is such a need for it because very few therapists do get it.
Hmm.
Dr. Ramani is an
Hmm.
amazing resource. And
The
I
best.
always send people, go watch her YouTube videos,
Yep.
think of it as like a Netflix marathon,
Yep.
and she's doing a great job of educating and wanting to train mental health professionals and therapists. And there are a lot of them out there that are amazing, but unless you've been through it, people just don't get it.
Yeah. It's so true. And yeah, Dr. Ramani is the best. I go to all of her workshops. She's awesome. And I send everybody to her YouTube because like she just explains it so well. And a lot of the time when it comes from an actual psychologist, it's like more credible in a way. Not that what we're saying is not credible, but like it just adds a layer of credibility to the fact that like, no, you're not imagining things. This is
Right.
really what you're going through. And yeah, it's so true with therapists. Like most of my clients have either been invalidated by them or told that they need to change their communication style and stuff about them and all that, which is the same as my experience in therapy too, and it gets you nowhere. And it's
Right.
supposed to help but it doesn't, which is really sad. It's such a backwards kind of thing.
Absolutely. And one of the big pushes that I've been doing lately is reaching out to therapists, mental health professionals, domestic violence agencies, because what they're teaching, the gray rock stuff is fantastic if
Mhm.
you don't have kids.
Right.
But when you're using gray rock communication in the court system, you
Mm,
look like the problem. You
so
look like
true.
you're bitter and jaded and that you don't like this person. And so I cringe when I see, people come to me and they say, well, my therapist said to do gray rock. And I'm like, okay, well, that's going to really hurt your family court case. And
Mhm.
so really learning, that's one style of communication. And then you come into the court system and it's like you have to learn a whole new language.
Right.
Um, which you're still allowed to have. I call it yellow rock
Okay.
communication.
Yeah, tell us
Um,
about that.
have a little or so it's gray rock with a
Okay.
touch of yellow. And
Okay.
so it's still the foundation of gray rock. You're still not showing emotions. You're still, keeping your boundaries, but you're adding a touch of politeness or common
Okay.
courtesy.
Yeah.
So I tell people it's almost like writing to a colleague or to your boss. You're not going to
Mhm.
emotionally unload on your boss, but you're going to be polite and cordial. And I one of the things I tell people is when you're using yellow rock communication, you're operating from your authentic place of truth.
Mhm.
So the court gets to see who you really are as a person, but you still get to incorporate the gray rock in. I have YouTube videos on it. If anyone's interested in learning more, they can go to the One Mom's Battle YouTube channel. And
Awesome.
I have several videos on yellow rock
Awesome.
communication.
I'll link your channel in the description of this so people can just access it because I think that's amazing, the yellow rock method.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. That's really
I found
smart. Yeah.
trial and error. I
Yeah.
tried it all out and I know where I failed. And
Yeah.
so now I tell
Totally.
people, don't make my mistakes.
Yeah, 100%. And that makes so much sense. Like, yeah, gray rock, you have to use gray rock so that you're not emotionally giving the narcissist anything. But
Right.
it's true at the same time, you don't really have to be a jerk about it. And especially in the court system, you want to show the judge and everybody who's basically in charge of your fate in a sense
Right.
there, like that you're a decent person. So if you're
Right.
just very cold about the gray rock, then that's gonna backfire for sure. So adding
Right.
a little dash of politeness to it is
Right.
perfect. So I
Right.
like the yellow rock.
And
Yeah.
keeping in mind that you're writing to the judge. They
Yeah,
are the ones deciding your fate. And if you're
exactly.
writing to the narcissist, you're giving them too much power and control. And so I used to keep a post-it on my laptop and it said to judge CC ex-husband. And that was just my reminder that what I put in writing has nothing to do with him. It's
Right,
all about how the judge reads it. And I want
right.
the judge to see who I am as a person,
Mhm.
and because it matters over
Amazing.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. So how are the girls doing now with everything? Like
They
when
are living
with all
their
the
best
contact
life.
finished, yeah.
It's they've had peace for a long
Amazing.
time since 2014. And so to them, you know, a lot of their friends don't even know that they had a biological father. Like they
Yeah.
believe my husband, Glenn, has been in our
Yeah.
lives since they were really little. And so
Amazing.
they just, they're living a normal life and they're
Perfect.
teenagers and um getting their driver's license and all that stuff and
Amazing.
thriving. It's yeah, my daughter said to me recently, it was such a healing moment for me. She's 16 and she said, when I was a kid and I used to ask you stuff about court or about the stuff with their bio dad. She goes, it used to frustrate me because you would always say, your job is to be a kid and it's my job to be the adult and let me worry about adult issues. And she goes, I used to get so frustrated when you would say that. And now I am really glad you just let us be kids because we didn't even know what you were going through. And that was such a powerful, and it confirmed that, I went with my gut and on sheltering them to the best of my ability from this because it's a lot on the whole family.
Yeah. No, that's the most amazing thing you could have done for them. And I'm so happy that they're thriving and living their best lives. And, I hope that this gives hope to any parents that are facing a similar situation to know that, like, just because this is happening right now, it does not mean that your kids are doomed. Like, they're going to be fine as long as they have that stable parent in their lives that's advocating for them. So just never give up on your kids.
Absolutely. And I had to remind myself a lot, they're living their own, they're on a parallel journey. And
Mhm.
there are a lot of things that are just out of my control. And I have to trust and hope that whatever their life experience is, it's also happening for a reason. And
Mhm.
they're going to go into the world as resilient, young women because of what they've been through. And that was really what I clung to. And it has come to fruition. That is very much who they are. And so that brought me a lot of peace during the journey.
That's so amazing. I'm so happy for all of you guys. Like, that's just
You.
the best success story that you can ever, even though it took 10 years, it's
Right.
still in the end you won, right? Like, the
We did.
truth prevails, the truth comes
Right.
out, the reality gets exposed no matter how much the narcissist tries to lie about everything and trying to paint you in a bad light and all that stuff. So I'm super proud of you, your daughters, your new husband, all that good stuff. Like, that's so amazing. And how can people find you and sign up for your program potentially?
Sure. So One Mom's Battle is my main website, and it's just onemomsbattle.com. And then the High Conflict Divorce Coach certification program is hcdivorcecoach.com.
Amazing. So yeah, I'll have that all linked in the description so people can find that very easily. And can people work with you one on one, or is it your coaches that you train that do that kind of stuff?
So I'm phasing out. My
Yeah.
my schedule is really packed, so I'm not currently accepting new clients,
Mhm.
but I have a lot of really amazing people that I can refer
Amazing.
to.
Amazing.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So if anyone's hearing this, you can be referred to an amazing divorce coach who can help you get through all of this stuff. And they have been trained by the best, which is Tina right here. So we'll have all of that stuff linked in the description. And do you have any final words for anybody who, is potentially going through a high conflict divorce right now and dealing with all the custody issues with their shared children?
Remember that it's an ultra marathon and the narcissist trains for a 5K or a 10K. And the reality is that this, being with the kids is really not what it's about for them. And so, they're showing up and yes, they can get ahead and they can, take more parenting time, but it's usually not sustainable. Once the reality sets in and the feed from the court system is turned off and you're out of the court system, the reality of having to parent day in and day out, they're not qualified to do that. It's not sustainable. And that's where I talk about, they don't train for the marathon. We are in it for the marathon. And so just keep, it's pacing yourself and just like you would do with training for an actual marathon.
Mhm. Oh, that's amazing. I love that metaphor. It's so true. It's definitely a marathon. Well, thank you so much for being here, Tina, and sharing
Thank
your wisdom and
you.
your story. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for having me. Take
Of
care.
course. Take care. Bye.